Good evening, everyone. It's the Action Hour. I'm Lindsey Baker, your host, and tonight I have with me a very, very important guest. Today I have with me Holly Gann Bice, who is Director of Government Relations for Wild Horse Campaign, American Wild Horse Campaign. How could I mess that up? You guys are amazing and what you're doing. And Holly, you come to us tonight. I was telling you off camera that we have done some interviews on this subject before, but with a lot of new information, FOIA reports on the injuries, etc. So let's jump right in. For the people that don't know what's going on at the Roundups at all, let's just show a typical picture of what happens at one of the Roundups here. Nope, not the Roundup. Let's see. There we go. That's the one I want to show. So our mics aren't muted, so you can talk during this and just kind of, if you want to talk people through what they're seeing here.
Yeah, and what we're seeing, this is the reality of what happens during a wild horse roundup. They are relentlessly chased by helicopters, as you could see there, not just adult horses, but, small foals. We've seen some as young as 2 weeks old. They're being chased by the helicopters. So the American Wild Horse Campaign, we do try to send out observers to each of the roundups. And, what we are seeing is probably just the tip of the iceberg, quite frankly. But what we're seeing is these animals are being run to just pure exhaustion. You can see how some of the little ones can't keep up. They get separated from their mothers. We've seen in several of the recent roundups where their mother was captured by the BLM and they were left behind on the range. And these are nursing foals that need to be with their mother to be able to eat. And they were orphaned as a result of the roundup. We're seeing that, these are wild animals and they are being out of nowhere chased by this giant helicopter. And they're terrified. They're traumatized from their perspective. This is absolutely terrifying. And they're frantic and they get chased into a trap. We find that on a routine basis, horses are dying from breaking their necks, running frantically into the traps. They're suffering broken legs, everything that you can think of, and some just die from the pure exhaustion of it. Some of the horses start fighting. Some horses get trampled in the pens because, again, they're just so traumatized and frantic that this is even happening to them.
That's right. And we saw that footage, I think, several times. It's been on Facebook where you see one of the colts get up on his back legs. He comes down and all of the horses start to follow him this way. And there are mares here and they just go down. And thankfully, we can't see it, but we know what happened. They're probably not with us anymore. And that's what these reports are showing. Do you want to maybe we should jump right into that?
Yeah.
The reports that you guys have. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have a few reports, from, we do keep documentation on our website, AmericanWildHorseCampaign.org. We write up reports of each roundup where we have someone in attendance. We want to bring as much transparency to this and public awareness about what's happening out there on the range when a roundup occurs. Ideally, what should be the case is that there should be cameras. There should be cameras on the helicopters. There should be cameras up on the traps so that there would be full transparency to see what's going on. Public observation is often an issue. So I do always like to say, as a disclaimer, we're probably really just seeing the tip of the iceberg because we're not able to see. BLM dictates where we're able to stand. at the Roundup, and quite frankly, they don't have the best incentive to give us a really good viewing spot.
No.
So oftentimes our observers do have difficulty getting, good visual of what's going on, but they document as much as they can. So we do have detailed Roundup reports online that document these instances that we're seeing. But we have also started to, we know that the helicopter Roundups are cruel and inhumane, but we were starting to really be concerned about what's happening once they leave the range. Once they are taken to the short-term holding facilities, the government holding facilities, so that's the next step. What's happening there? Because again, these animals are being traumatized and run to just pure exhaustion. So we started filing FOIA requests. As you can see, that footage is just, it just speaks for itself. The footage, it really does. But we have started filing requests under the Freedom of Information Act to find out a bit more about what's happening at the short-term holding facilities as far as the deaths that they are recording at those facilities. We found this is just an initial response that we've already received. So it's awful. I think the takeaway point here is that the brutality does not end on the range. It continues for these animals in the short-term government holding facilities. So we see causes of death on here.
Please read some, of course.
More broken necks, broken legs, skull fractures, brain injuries, gelding complications. We see just dozens and dozens of deaths just from this first initial request from just a few Roundups. We see a disturbing number of mares, female horses that are dying while giving birth at these facilities. It raises a lot of concerns.
It does. And the irony behind this is that the criteria that the BLM uses for the Roundups is the protection of the wild horses because of overpopulation, starvation, dehydration, etc., which from what I understand is not true because the amount of horses on the land is just ridiculous. A lot more horses could be there and they would still have plenty of food. You want to just talk about that for a moment?
They really would. And apologies for that for a second.
No worries.
So they really would. It's the BLM overpopulation myth. BLM thinks that we should only have about 17,000 to 27,000 horses on the range. And this is over about 27 million acres of land. Quite frankly, that's absurd. If you do the math, that's only about 100 horses per herd management area. That's not many. That's not even enough for, genetic diversity and healthy, self-sustaining herds. There is room for horses. And the problem is that, BLM has just convinced itself that there's this overpopulation issue and chooses to allocate the majority of the forage resources to livestock instead of the horses, even though, horses and burros are supposed to be federally protected and livestock is not federally protected.
Not to mention the livestock is just destroying the landscape because they're not meant to be there. They're not indigenous. They're not even from North America to begin with. They're not supposed to be there. The horses are part of the ecosystem, and it's just ridiculous. We have some comments coming in. Let's just check out what people have to say. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Join us in the fight. Okay, so American Wild Horse Campaign. Great comment. Yes, please. And okay. You want to should I show the action site here as we continue?
Absolutely.
We're just touching the iceberg. We're going to get into a lot more. But let me just screen share, and you could keep going, if you want to continue as I do this, but I'm going to bring on your Action Center link.
Great.
And we'll do it a couple times because we want everybody to reach out and go ahead. I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to our Action Center. That's on our website, AmericanWildHorseCampaign.org. Go to our Action Center. And we have it set up so that it's really easy for you to contact your members of Congress. You can just take action. We have a couple of really good action items there. Apologies. So one is regarding the Wyoming. There's a roundup happening right now. It's the largest in BLM history, the Wyoming checkerboard roundup. So you can take action on that. I would definitely encourage everyone to do that. And you can also take action, contact your members of Congress through this other link to, urge your members of Congress to support on-range management strategies. We have got to stop this culture or this mentality of managing wild horses and burros by rounding them up and removing them from the range. They are wild animals, and they're part of the environment, and they are legally protected, and they have a right to be there as well. But that fundamental problem comes down to livestock, and the livestock interests tend to win out, and BLM is heavily biased against wild horses and in favor of the livestock industry. It's not only the wild horses are being scapegoated, quite frankly, and we're seeing a number of environmental organizations that are starting to speak out about this because it seems like it's a lot easier for the federal government to blame wild horses and burros for land damage and remove them from the range than to inconvenience the livestock industry. But the reality is that the cattle, the livestock, greatly outnumber the number of wild horses and burros on the range. Even in their legal habitat, the horses are so outnumbered, and BLM chooses to allocate at least 75% of the forage to livestock, leaving the horses with only between like 22 and 25% of the forage allocation. So, if BLM made it just a little bit, even just a little bit more equitable, we could have a lot more horses on the range. But again, it's this illusion of overpopulation when that's just simply not the case. It's just that they're prioritizing livestock.
Well, I know that some environmentalists are getting involved. Some environmentalists that are also horse conservationists and wildlife conservationists are getting involved and going to the government and saying, hey, it's not only the horses, we're destroying the environment. After the livestock has been on this land and buzzcut it, there's wildfires when we do these roundups. Historically, there have been wildfires that come almost immediately afterwards. None of this is being addressed. Now, I know that you work with government officials. How have you been able to work with them, and where do you see this going? Do you see them starting to acknowledge the will of the people? Because there's a huge public outcry against this. Can you address that for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do government relations work. So I spend a lot of time, talking to, for example, members of Congress about this issue. We're dealing with a federal agency and federally protected horses. So that's the federal Congress comes into play. And, the Congress can help put BLM on a better track, a more humane, sustainable track. And, we're really on the cusp of what would be the greatest congressional victory for wild horses and burros that has occurred in a very, very long time. So this year, both the House and the Senate Appropriations Committees, and these are the committees in Congress that determine what the BLM's budget will be and what the budget will be for the wild horse and burro program in particular as well. And those committees have decided to, for the first time, allocate a dedicated amount of funding, $11 million, toward reversible fertility control vaccines. And that's a significant historic first step towards moving the agency away from, again, these cruel, inhumane removals toward an on-range management strategy that allows the animals to stay in the wild where they belong.
Now, in talking to some of the different groups, there's different feelings about the fertility strategy. And we're just, Jane Unchained, actually, we're now Unchained News, which is a whole Unchained TV News, whole new thing. He's really excited. But back to the fertility issue. Can you just address that a little bit of why you guys feel it's the right path and how how the plan would work, etc. Can you address that a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely understand that there are different feelings about it.
Mhm.
And, that's understandable. But, we're operating under what is, considered to be realistic and politically viable as well. And the reality is that if we're not doing anything, these animals are going to continue to be cruelly round up and removed and warehoused, stockpiled in these government holding facilities. Doing nothing is not an option, and it's not an option that is going to work, uh, you know, among our federal policymakers as well. And so, unfortunately, there have been plans put out there to conduct these mass removals. And that is something that we're dealing with right now. And so, faced with that, we need to look at what is in the best interest of the horses. Do we do nothing and allow them to just be eradicated from the land? Because BLM is going to conduct these removals. This is going to happen unless we're pushing for a humane alternative. I should say that, fertility control vaccines, they're scientifically proven. So the American Wild Horse Campaign, we actually operate the world's largest PZP fertility control program. We operate one on a herd in Nevada. It's a herd of 3,000 horses, over 300,000 acres. We've got a really great field team out there that manages that herd very successfully with PZP. And we've seen it's doing great. I mean, we're showing that it works in real life, in practice. But, not surprisingly, the science, there's 30 years of science showing that PZP works, and it's a humane option to allow these animals to stay in the wild. The only problem is that BLM's not using it. And then that's where Congress comes in. And they did issue a directive. The House Appropriations Committee actually directed the agency to implement fertility control vaccines. Because again, the agency historically has always relied on roundups and removals. They consider that to be their quick fix. The problem is that the National Academy of Sciences back in 2013 said removals actually don't work. It seems like it's like this Band-Aid thing that you do overnight. But the National Academy of Sciences pointed out that it actually maximizes population growth rates on the range. Whereas something like fertility control kind of helps to stabilize, those populations.
Right. Okay. Well, we're getting some comments here. I don't know if we want to get into a debate, but we are getting some comments, and for transparency, I will show it. So it says, we don't really know if it's reversible. There are many who believe it's dangerous. I think fertility issue is a false narrative sold as a way to stop roundups, but the 22 budget allocates millions more for roundups despite using fertility drug. It also buys into the overpopulation narrative. That part I do agree. I mean, I do want to say that they are overestimating how many to allocate, but there's nothing. I mean, they're making the decisions. They're calling the shots, right? So if they say that there can only be this many on the land, regardless of whether or not it's a falsehood, that's what. Is there any chance of us getting them to, all of the truth to come out about what's going on? For example, we can maybe now get into the situation about the adoptions, the so-called adoptions, and where the New York Times article, and then you guys did an investigation from
That's
there.
right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, the problem is that when horses are being managed by taking them off of the range, they're immediately being put at risk of slaughter. And this is another one of those situations where we've probably just, seen the tip of the iceberg. We have conducted an investigation, and it was corroborated by the New York Times as well. They did a piece on this, finding that a number of horses that were being adopted out through the adoption incentive program were actually ending up in the hands of kill buyers and at slaughter auctions as well. And the Adoption Incentive Program, for a little bit of background, this is another one of those BLM programs that they have created because they're removing all these animals from the range, and quite frankly, they want to get them out of the way. They need to get rid of them. And this is not the first time that the BLM has been caught in a slaughter scandal. Fortunately, dozens of members of Congress have been speaking out about the Adoption Incentive Program. The House Appropriations Committee also issued a concern about the Adoption Incentive Program and directed the agency to conduct a review of that program to tighten some things up there. But what we're seeing is that as long as this Adoption Incentive Program exists, these horses and burros are at risk of slaughter. The program pays people $1,000 to take an untrained wild horse or burro. Right. Quite frankly, it's an economic incentive to someone who doesn't have good intentions, can go get a horse, stick it in a field for a year, and then once title passes and they've secured their $1,000, they can go take it to a kill buyer or a slaughter auction and make a profit from there as well.
And I think that's one issue that all of the groups I've talked to agree on, that the adoption program must be reformed or revamped because it is not working. And that is exactly what's happening, and it's been proven in investigations and so forth. We are getting more comments. So we have mixed comments. We have some people pro. We have another person here commenting, read about the AWHC's Humane Management Program for Virginia Rein horses. So that would be for people to go ahead and take a look on that. Did you want to just talk about that for a moment? What that program is? Is she talking about fertility?
Yeah, that's the fertility control program that we operate. We have a field team there in Nevada that operate that program, and it's turned out to be very, very successful. So again, we use the PZP vaccine. Again, that's been proven with 30 years of scientific research showing that it works, and it's a humane option for managing wild horses rather than allowing them to be round up and ending up at slaughter and being killed. The reality is that, we need to protect these animals and we need to put their best interests first and have a full understanding of the environment that we're working in. For me personally, I would love to be able to just leave them alone and not have to manage them at all. But when we do that, BLM is rounding them up, and BLM has issued.
Just to kind of put another couple more points, just let me get in real quickly. We have to invite the BLM on at any time to dialogue about this issue. We want to invite them on. And I do want to say that there is a herd that has not been touched. Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank right now, but there's a herd in Arizona that has not ever been rounded up, or not for 17 years. And they do self-regulate, but they haven't, but it's what you're saying is we're not going to have that option. We don't have that option to do that right now. I think that's
and kind of the way it's been set up is it puts the horses and burros at a disadvantage. They're being separated out into these herd management areas, which, this is another thing that we've advocated for is, expanding habitat options for these animals. Because right now they're, HMAs, the herd management areas, are often these fenced in areas, and, they're not always kind of mapped out in the most logical way. So you really can't, the horses and the burros don't really get a chance to kind of do any like seasonal migration or really move around. They're a little kind of trapped by these, these boundaries that have been, created by humans. And, that makes some things difficult.
Yes, and we can see in these photos here how magnificent it is when they are out unbounded in the wild. What I think maybe we should show again where people can go to get more information, and that would be the action link that you have right here. I'll put the link up right now.
Absolutely.
So it's just AmericanWildHorseCampaign.org action-center. So easy to remember, but we'll be putting all of these links up in the comments after the show. I'll have at the top, if anybody wants to get any of these links. We do want to ask everyone to please share out this broadcast to help get the word out. We want to get as many people as possible to sign the petitions to stop these roundups, to get the government to take action. This is horrific what is happening. And the mere fact that it just keeps happening, Holly, why do you think that's so? Why do you think that our government officials aren't paying attention to what the people, the will of the people, again?
I think it comes down to those livestock interests are deeply entrenched, and the BLM has essentially, created this illusion of overpopulation, and so that's the message that they're really, pushing
Right
to the Congress. And so what we're doing, a large part of what I do is, advocating to educate the U.S. Congress that these animals are not overpopulated. They're being scapegoated. They're not getting their fair share of the resources. There is a bias towards protecting the livestock industry interests. I should note that it's not even just about scapegoating. It is, the livestock industry benefits at every step of the process in wild horse removals. We find that livestock operators, they have the helicopter roundup contracts. They have contracts for short-term holding facilities. They have contracts for the long-term holding facilities. And then they get the grazing subsidies. They are literally benefiting at every stage of the process. So they have an incentive to keep this whole roundup and removal culture going. But at the same time, they're spreading this misinformation saying that, oh, horses are damaging the land. Look what they're doing to the land. And so what we're trying to do is educate our lawmakers to show them, no, it's actually the livestock grazing that is ruining the land and our environment and contributing to climate change. Again, in wild horse and burro habitat, they're only getting like 22% of the forage allocation. They're so outnumbered by the cattle. And so I am finding that as we do a substantial amount of outreach on Capitol Hill, that lawmakers are hearing. They're hearing what we're saying. And that's why it's so important for people to call their members of Congress, to write in. You're absolutely welcome to use our action alerts that we have on our website. It's an easy way to help connect you with your members of Congress. But they need to hear from you that you oppose these mass roundups. You want to see humane alternatives used for horses. And they need to hear from people. And I always encourage people, when you contact your members of Congress, make sure you've got, your facts straight, and always be very polite. And they will hear you. They'll record when you call in or you send them an email or a message through the action alert. They take note that a constituent has reached out to them.
Yes, and it's really easy because the way that you have it set up here, that if somebody is just coming on with very little information, but they know that once they read this, they agree with what they see here, it's just so easy for them to get this to the right people. You guys have made it so easy. So everyone, please go to this action link, AmericanWildHorseCampaign.org/action-center. It will be a link will be in the comments for you right after the broadcast. So we did have a couple more comments here. Maybe you want to address. USDA needs to make it legal for import pens to accept horses with BLM freeze brands if they really want to end slaughter of wild horses. As it is, one agency, USDA, is enabling the prohibition of another agency. Boy, that's a lot to read, very tiny. So do you want to comment on what they're saying there?
Oh, that text is a little bit, that is a little bit tiny, but I think they are asking kind of about the horse slaughter issue, correct? Yeah, I mean, we also support.
They're saying that the USDA is enabling it. I believe that's what they're saying. Enabling the prohibition of another agency, DOI. I don't know. I'm not.
Yeah,
anyway.
Well, I definitely will say that. The horse slaughter issue and the wild horse issue, they intersect. They very closely.
is something that we are certainly hugely concerned about. We also support, in addition to the advocacy we do on protecting wild horses and burros, we also advocate for a permanent ban on equine slaughter. So there is federal legislation, the Save America's Forgotten Equines Act, and that is some permanent legislation that would permanently protect, wild horses, domestic horses, burros, donkeys from being slaughtered. It would prevent horse slaughter plants from operating in the U.S. As you know, we had horse slaughter plants that were operating here domestically.
Illegal, of course, right?
Yeah, until about
Not legal, so yeah.
And then it would also stop them from being exported across the border for human consumption as well.
That's so important that it happens that way. So, what else would you like people to know? We have a few more minutes here. So, anything else you want to share? What would you like people to do right now? I know you want them to go to the action link and take action. That's number one. But anything else? Sharing this out, definitely tell people about what's going on. But what would you like to add?
Yeah, I want to add just how crucial it is to take action and to contact your members of Congress. Set up a meeting with your members of Congress. Your members of Congress all they all have offices in Washington D.C. where I'm based, but they also have local offices where you live as well. So anyone, you can just contact your members of Congress to set up a meeting with them. And if they're not doing in-person meetings, they'll set up something on Zoom. Sometimes they'll do it on the phone. But it's a great way to connect. And again, I would keep it very polite and have all your facts together. But I think it's a critical time to take action because one thing we're facing again is that because there's a lot of misinformation coming from the livestock industry, BLM, the agency itself, sending a lot of misinformation to the Congress and other policymakers. The BLM put together a plan that they released last year that would be, they call it a management plan, but it's very dangerous. It's not a management plan.
Dangerous how? How is it? Tell us how it's dangerous.
Yeah, so what it would call for are mass removal of wild horses and burros from the range. So in just the first 5 years, BLM intends to round up 90,000 horses and burros. That's more than exists on the range right now. It's absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
It'll come at a hefty price. The first 5 years, about $1 billion, and that's your taxpayer dollars that are going to cruelly and inhumanely round up these animals and then go stop them.
And what does it cost per year to keep the horses in the pens? It costs thousands and thousands of dollars per year, right?
So BLM says it costs about $50,000 to take care of a horse for its lifetime. Yeah, and so that is part of why we're saying, look, it is much more. It's not just better for the horse to keep the horse in the wild with its family, in its natural habitat, but it's also much more cost effective as well. So for example, with fertility control, the PZP vaccine. It's about $30 a dose. Even if you include other program costs involved, equipment costs, you're looking at about $220 per treatment. And then that horse can stay, with her family on the range, and compare that to rounding them up and stockpiling them and putting them at risk of slaughter. And, one of the major concerns of this plan that was released by BLM last year is that, as the government stockpiles more and more and more horses, at some point, the government's going to get tired of footing the bill for that. And there have been times in the past where there was a serious concern about mass killing the wild horses in holding, or that was often used as a reason to allow horse slaughter plants to operate in the U.S. We have to fight every single year to keep horse slaughter plants closed in the U.S. It is not something to be taken for granted. There is only a temporary ban on horse slaughter plants out in the U.S.
There's only a temporary ban, so this is something that is going to recur. It's going to rear its ugly head. It's
Yeah,
just a
if,
matter of
if
time.
we are not
We
careful,
don't take action.
do not continue to advocate, and if we do not get BLM on a more humane and sustainable track, we are looking at a very real possibility of horse, mass killing, slaughter of wild horses, or horse slaughter plants opening in the U.S. We've managed to keep them closed each year through a funding restriction. We defund horse slaughter inspections each year through the Agriculture Appropriations Bill. Something that I personally have worked on for many, many years to keep that in place. But in some political climates, that has been extremely difficult to do. And so it is not a wise choice to stockpile tens of thousands of wild horses who would essentially be sitting there at risk of slaughter. So we have no choice but to urge BLM a better way that doesn't involve stockpiling these horses. And I do think
You're
Congress.
cutting out a little bit, Holly.
Oh,
I'm not sure why.
I'm sorry.
Just
Okay. Am I good now?
You're okay right now, yeah.
I do think that the Congress is open to hearing the message. I think there are, members of Congress who, in the appropriations committees, do recognize that this sole reliance on roundups and removals has been ineffective, just like the National Academy of Sciences pointed out back in 2013. And so I'm finding that the more I have these conversations with, various U.S. representatives, U.S. senators, they are interested in hearing about better choices that could be made to get BLM on a better track. And ultimately, the goal here is to stop the roundups. I mean, that's really what the ultimate goal is.
Now, this question here, this comment brings up Tracy Stone Manning, who is the new director of the BLM. What hopes do you have that you may be able to reach her and get some better results with the new director?
Yeah, Director Tracy Stone Manning, she doesn't have really a record on the wild horse issue. So, we're welcoming her as the new BLM director. We would like to offer our assistance. She is going to be faced with the challenge of reforming this program, and this is an opportunity for reform at the BLM, and we're going to remain hopeful that she will work towards reforming the program, and we would be happy to offer our assistance and helping to make that happen.
I see there was one other link that we didn't mention that's a very important link. Am I correct? Keep it wild. I mean, keep Wyoming wild, right?
Keep Wyoming wild. Yes, that is
yes.
about the Wyoming Roundup, because that Wyoming Roundup is actually the largest in federal history. They're looking to eradicate about half of the horses in the state. Absolutely absurd. Add it to the list of absurd activities being conducted by the BLM right now. Yeah. So, asking people to take action for this, because it's not just about protecting them from this one roundup. It's also about protecting them from the future roundups that are at stake. And we have to put up a fight. It's up to us to put up a fight for these animals.
Absolutely.
They can't speak for themselves. It's up to us. So I would encourage everyone to check out that link. We've got some information about what exactly is happening there, some good statistics and numbers, learn a little bit. And then again, an easy way to take action, so you can contact the BLM, contact Congress, and let them know what you think about this.
That's amazing. Now, I didn't remember that was the Heber herd in Heber, Arizona, that has not been touched in 17 years, and they're hoping to make it a study herd. So anyway, that's just that. And again, we want to invite the BLM on at any time to dialogue about this. We would love to dialogue with them, find out a little bit more about what the heck they're doing and what's their plan. And We do want this to stop. So please, 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 everyone, take action. This is such an easy no-brainer. You just go to the site, click, 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 and you're done. And you've done such a tremendous thing. I went on today and did it. It took me literally a minute for each of the 3 different actions that were there. 1 minute each, if that. So we can all spare that. And speak up, right to your congressman. Tell them, like you said, they want to hear from us and we can make a difference. Holly, I want to thank you so much for being on tonight, and we would welcome you back in the future. Let us know how it goes. We want to be there to support you, and we're there for the horses, of course, and we hope this can end soon.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll have to all keep fighting the good fight and try to work together the best that we can on behalf of the horses and burros, because again, they're counting on us to be their voice. They don't have anyone else, and the atrocities that are occurring are just, it's too much. It's due time for it to end.
Indeed, indeed. Thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.
Thanks everyone.